The only thing that I can tell you, George, is that for the safety of the staff and the members to get back to the democratic process they commenced this morning in sounding the clip for the electoral college, as we do every January 6th, every 4 years. We will be doing that as soon as they can promise us that the facility is safe. As one of your callers just mentioned a little while ago, they're going to have to check every nook and cranny to make sure that none of these individuals left anything that would cause any injury, again, to the staff or the elected officials, and also for people to follow through with our duty.
Were you able to engage any of the protesters personally?
No, I was never that to any of them, and but I know the Capitol Police. I thank them every day when I see them. I look into their eyes, and I know that they're men and women, husbands and wives. And again, I'm praying for them, and I know what kind of hearts that they have. They're tough. They know how to do their job, but at the same time, they do strength. And I'm so glad that unfortunately, many of them have been injured. They just got reported. But I hope and pray that is at a minimum, and that we can move forward as quickly as possible with a democratic process.
Congressman Cardenas, thanks very much for your time. We're seeing video now of members of the protesters mob. It appeared to smash media equipment. I did see the police looking by and perhaps lighting a fire. Rachel Scott has been on the scene during the day. What can you tell us about what you're seeing? Finally, we lost Rachel. Things out there at the Capitol, but we do have Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, member of the House leadership. A day you thought you'd never see, I'm sure, Congressman.
Without question, George, and we should pray for our nation and make sure that we never see a day like this again. The Capitol was breached. It was stormed by traitors, people engaged in treasonous and seditious behavior, incited by the President of the United States of America. And he should tell his supporters in clear and unequivocal terms to stand down immediately. The president seems incapable intellectually of communicating a clear and direct message to his so-called supporters who have breached the Capitol, injured officers, placed innocent lives at risk, and turned America into something that I thought we would never see in a democracy anchored in the principle of the rule of law. But we are going to return to the Capitol. No, as soon as it's safe, we're not going to allow our rules to take over. We're going to complete our work. We're going to certify the results of the Electoral College. The people have spoken. The Electoral College has spoken. The court has spoken. Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States of America. He will be sworn in on January 20th.
Do you have any idea on how this is all going to unfold, when that's going to be able to happen, what the plans are to secure the Capitol?
We're following the guidance of the Capitol Police Sergeant at Arms, who, as I understand it, have called in additional resources to secure the Capitol. The members are being patient but anxious. Responsibilities, obviously. We will follow the direction of our public safety officers, but we're committed to the principle that no one is above the law and have a constitutional job to do. We are going to do it. We will not abandon our post.
And going forward, as you said, Joe Biden has been elected. He will be inaugurated on the same Capitol steps in just 14 days. How does the new Congress move forward, we hope, in some way, together, and to heal the wounds from what we've seen today?
Well, Joe Biden is the right man at the right time with respect to bringing our country together. Someone who has indicated from the very beginning on his election that he's not going to be the president just for Democrats. He's going to be the president, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, for those who voted for him and those who voted against him. And he's got the experience, the credibility, the authenticity, and the intellect accountability for what took place today is attack on our democracy, and the Congress and the Capitol and the rule of law should not be tolerated, and all options should be on the table.
Well, so I want to follow up on that because your colleague, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, is saying she's drawing up articles of impeachment for President Trump for what she's seen since the election, for the abuses of power she's seen since the election. Is that something that's on the table?
We haven't had an opportunity to talk as a caucus. We haven't had an opportunity to convene and discuss how we move forward in the context of accountability. But when I say all options are on the table, I mean all options should be on the table,
Including impeachment.
and every other process.
Including impeachment.
All options are on the table. All options are.
Thank you for your time today. Stay safe. Good luck in the coming hours. I want to bring in Trish Turner from the Capitol as well. Trish, you've been getting some reporting on senators starting to meet and try to figure out the way forward.
Yeah, that's right, Trish. We were a group of the media, including myself and one of my ADC colleagues, Alex Corn. We were escorted by Capitol Police and ATF officers to one of the Senate buildings. We've been asked not to say what the location is. Kind of seems like they brought us here to make sure that we are safe along with the senators, so we're near where they're meeting. They're in one of the larger hearing rooms on the Capitol complex, and they're meeting, trying to figure the way forward. As you heard from the congressman there, they are determined to move forward. It's unclear if they're able to actually keep the Senate debate session going on, over the first objection. We did come in contact with one of the supporters of the objection, Senator Mike Braun of Indiana. We tried to ask him, he said none of this should be tolerated, none of the violence should be tolerated, the looting, and storming of the Capitol. But we tried to ask him if this might spur him to withdraw the objections, because we know that there are at least two more that Senate Republicans were prepared to support, and he would not answer that question. So unclear how they're going to move forward. We did see, we've seen senators moving in and out. I don't believe there's a lot of business they can conduct in this hearing room, but we do have full reporters inside there. It's sort of a continuity of government situation, which is rather surreal. But that's the situation where we are at the moment.
Okay, Trish Turner, thank you very much. As this has all been unfolding, more news has been made in the political world. I want to bring in Rick Kleiner, our political director. It is now official. John Ross of the Democrat has won in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago, but only 24 hours ago, voters in Georgia, and both of those Senate seats are flipping. And it looked like a long shot for Democrats. They sat there at the end of election night, 2 seats short, but they won both of them in the state of Georgia. Democrats control of the Senate as of January 20th. When Biden and Harris were sworn in, Harris degree of irony in that the images of storming of the Capitol, including the Senate chamber today by Trump supporters, it will be Democrats in control of the Senate as well as the House, all of government, come January 20th.
Rick Klein, thanks very much. Merrick Bruce, that comes on January 20th when Joe Biden is inaugurated. First item of business it was supposed to be dealing with the pandemic. Of course, that will still be front and center. But these images today, these actions today, is going to change the tenor for this entire Congress, the early days of the Biden presidency.
George, I look at this image right here, and that's exactly where the president is normally sworn in. Quite a contrast to what we are seeing right there, and hard to imagine that this doesn't loom large still and overshadow much of the beginning of the Biden presidency. His top priority has been to try and unite the country. It is going to be very hard to do that. Clearly, given what we are seeing, given it's obvious that many of the president's supporters simply don't view Joe Biden as a legitimate president. But Joe Biden, of course, has promised repeatedly to be a president for all Americans, whether you support him or not. And he does want to get to business very rapidly. Of course, tackling the pandemic is the top priority. Doing something to give Americans more of a financial lifeline. So another stimulus, another COVID stimulus bill is also something that you're going to see happen in quite short order. And then because Democrats do control or will control Congress, that does change everything. It changes the scope and the scale of Biden's ambitions here and his ability to fulfill so many of his campaign promises. It doesn't change everything because, of course, it is a 50-50 split in the Senate. That is a very, very small majority. Of course, the Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be the tie-breaking vote. But it does mean that on so many issues, Joe Biden will be able to go big, certainly much bigger than he would have envisioned if the Republicans still in control of the Senate. And just remarkable to have this happen today, or to have 12 hours, after we saw these races in Georgia, to see what we are seeing, to see the divide in the Republican Party play out in this way is just remarkable.
And to see what we are seeing right now as you were talking, those detonations on the steps of the Capitol, as you were talking, smoke being cleared as well. People seem to scatter as the detonations took off, as there we see some more of them as well, these flash bombs. I don't know who we have down there. Is Martha Rides anywhere close to that scene? Martha, can you tell us? Rachel Scott, okay, Rachel Scott, you're down. And can you tell us what's happening there, Rachel?
These have finally taken down this section of the Capitol. If you can take a look just right behind, you can see them clearing out the final demonstrators and protesters that stormed the barricades, climbed over, pushed up, passed, and stormed inside of the Capitol building here. This entire area, George, was completely blocked off. I want to show you. You can see some of the gates and the barricades that were set up here. On the other side, they have all burned down as these demonstrators and protesters charged up those steps and into the Capitol building. I talked to so many here today. They came from Florida. They came from Georgia. I was on a flight from Georgia after covering those runoff elections just yesterday. They said they wanted to stand by the president. They wanted to help him fight an election that he overwhelmingly lost. And they said they would not accept the results until he said that he had lost this race. They feel like they were answering a call directly from the president here today. And as that message came out, we have seen some of the demonstrators in this area clear on the other side of the Capitol building. We watched as some of those demonstrators climbed up scaffolding, climbed onto the steps, banged on the glass, chanting "Fight for Trump," chanting USA. But George, I gotta tell you, there is just one image that I cannot get out of my mind as I'm talking to you here. And it was just a few feet away as we were standing, watching all of this unfold. Ambulances rushing out. One woman, she was gushing out blood. They rushed her into that ambulance and drove her away. We do not know what the condition was, but it was just a really tense moment here. And watching these matter of events just would take a turn short hours, George.
A heartbreaking, Rachel. Okay, thanks very much. I want to bring in Brad Garrett, FBI Special Agent. Brad, Rachel has just described something happening right now. Based on your experience, describe what's going to be happening over the next several hours.
So, George, you have to do this sort of in stages. You have people next to the building. They've used, it looks some type of tear gas to move them. As you pointed out, it has limited effect on them. And they'll gradually have to move that out. Because realistically, you can't use the National Guard to do baseline law enforcement stuff. You're going to use them as a perimeter. And so once they get the people pushed out, they basically are going to have to stay as a ring, in my view, in some form or fashion around the Capitol. Because the reality is, when you push them out eventually, as we go into nightfall, George, there's always tomorrow and the next day. And so this is not like that there won't be other groups of people. And one other thing, as this gets later, and I think Martha pointed this out, you're going to have other players trying to get involved in this that'll be more of an instigator type person. And they're going to have to deal with those folks. But you clearly have to get them away, at least out of the immediate perimeter of the building before it gets dark.
Brad Garrett, thanks very much. The darkness is starting to fall there in Washington, D.C., a little after 5 p.m. here on the East Coast. I want to bring in Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Congresswoman Lee, what can you tell us about what you've been told, how this is going to unfold over the next several hours?
Well, George, I think you know, first of all, that the chambers were attacked in the midst of the counting of the electoral votes. Members were engaged in a constitutional duty. The chambers were attacked, guns were drawn, tear gas. Members were told to flee. I don't think you can get away from that as we begin to unwind as will be next. We're in a secure, unknown place at this time. And members are asked to stand by as they go
work begins to discern and to determine how safe we can be in order to proceed with the constitutional duty that we have. And we do have that commitment to do that constitutional duty, and that is counting the electoral vote.
And Congressman, do you have any understanding of how this was allowed to happen if the proper preparations were in place?
You know, this is a democracy, and I did send out a message even before this started that I did not have any fear and would stand to do our duty. We like to have a difference of opinion, but this was not a difference of opinion. This was a call to war and a call to action as called by the sitting president of the United States. Individuals thought they were coming to defend the president, and I don't have any access to news except what each of us are hearing. But I'm really calling on President Trump to ask these rioters to stand down. They're no longer protesters, and we welcome protests. That is what we do in this country, and we will stand for them and their right to express their First Amendment views anytime. That's our job. But this was an attack. These are rioters. These are people finding the wall. These are people violating the office of the Speaker of the House. And so I think what has to be done, every aspect of our heading to the chambers has to be secured so that the work can continue. But members are committed for the work to continue. But I am asking, and I think the country would benefit from some message that Donald Trump is rioters to stand down and to realize that the democratic process has to proceed. And as you all know, Republicans are standing up and objecting. That is a process they have a right to do. But the violence that occurred immediately through, if I might, a fear. The kind of democracy that we try to say, and we got to say democracy.
After these actions of today, about Elon Musk going up one of the quote everything is off the table.
I think it's true that there will be a number of members doing so because I am going up as a member of the Judiciary Committee for all of the impeachment. I think we have seen today some actions that in our lifetime we would never have expected to see, and frankly, in my century we never saw, in this century we never saw, and by many others, the last time America stood up against each other was the Civil War, and of course, President Lincoln, of course, we all admire the protection of the duty to the nation and patriotism, really spoke to the heart of that instead of nation divided against itself, or at least his words connoted that. A nation divided against itself cannot stand. And I want us to be united. I want us to have the freedom to express our opposition and disagreement. But what Donald Trump generated was a violation of his duty with the abuse of power. It's clearly it calls out for accountability. It calls out for accountability. I'm glad to say that, but it calls out for accountability. And I can't tell it to him. As I'm asking, and he's taking it and I'm asking him, please come to the public microphone and to give comfort for his supporters and ask them to stand down, ask them to protest peacefully and to cease the attack against the United States Capitol, the capital of the United States of America.
Congresswoman, thank you very much for your time today. We hope you stay safe as well. I want to bring in Mary Bruce. Mary, we got some new pictures of what was happening inside of it. Is the Speaker's office?
Yeah, George, a remarkable image here that I think is one that just encapsulates this day and something that I think, we will remember this day for. There, one of the anarchists who stormed the Capitol sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk. That is the desk of the House Speaker. That appears to be her ceremonial office. You see this man there sitting casually, his feet disrespectfully on her desk, on a folder of hers. There have been, of course, reports of looting and vandalism throughout the halls of the Capitol, throughout other offices as well. been a frequent target of President Trump. He has taken her on, sort of tried to villainize her in some ways. She and the president have certainly gone head to head in many times in the past. But this image, I think, is just one that I think will be seared in the minds of many Americans going forward. This Trump supporter sitting at the House Speaker's desk, his boot on her desk.
Or how did they get that far? How did they get in the Capitol? How were they able to take over? Those are questions that are going to have to be answered in the coming days. Mary Bruce, thanks very much. I want to bring in Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana. Senator, right now, what can you tell us about what's going to be happening next in this debate?
We're sheltering in place, and so obviously they have to clear the Capitol. But I will echo what Congresswoman Reed said. We must complete this process. This is an attempt to disrupt a constitutional process. So what happens in third world countries, it should not be happening in the United States of America. And so as soon as the Capitol is clear, it would be my vote to go back in that chamber and finish this process.
That is, I guess, everyone's hope at this point. What responsibility, as you just heard, Congresswoman Lee, I know you were listening, does the president bear for how these protesters have acted today?
Say that one more time. I didn't quite understand how your question was phrased.
What responsibility does the president bear for these protests today, for these actions taking over the Capitol?
Clearly, these people are angry that the president lost. The president can speak to them like no other. I tweeted out a message asking that the president would speak to them without any sort of equivocation, that they need to stand down. That this is what, again, happens in third world countries, not in the United States of America. This is criminal activity, and that it discredits anything that the president would hope to stand for. And the president needs to do that on television. He needs to do it without equivocation and without any sort of kind of, what would you say, a codicil or any sort of thing that would otherwise moderate that explicit stand down.
Well, and is that what we saw earlier in that 1-minute videotape message where he called on them to stand down, but told the supporters he loved them and that the election wasn't being stolen?
So I don't think we should be speaking about stolen elections. I think we should be speaking about how we should not be rioting in the United States Capitol, and this is an assault upon our democracy.
When do you expect to get back to work?
I don't know that, George. Right now it's still fluid. I'm watching on television, see all the police fights, and so we shall see. But as far as I'm concerned, we stay here until we do this. It is our constitutional responsibility.
Senator Cassidy, stay safe. Thanks for joining us this evening. I want to bring in Cecilia Banks. Cecilia, one of the things we saw, and I was talking to Chris Christie about this in our last hour, the contrast in the president's statement to his supporters and what we heard from him this summer in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not going lost on so much of the American public. And I would venture to say particularly Black and brown people in our country. Those images that we all lived through over the summer of Black and brown protesters, as many people protesting peacefully, met with resistance, met with armed authorities, flashbangs that we saw that we're not seeing today. We didn't see flashbangs until fairly protest on the American public and people of color in our country who are wondering why is this discrepancy in how justice is being carried out today and whether this isn't justice being carried out and if this is equal justice in what we're seeing here.
Cecilia Vega, thanks very much. I want to bring in John Santucci, one of our White House producers. John, what are you learning from inside the White House right now?
Inside the White House, George, it's relatively quiet. It's calm. I'm told the president has been bouncing between the Oval and private dining room, which is just off from the Oval Office, watching coverage today. There's been a small number of aides that have seen the president in person. They include Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, and Ivanka Trump, the president's daughter, and senior divine. They have been lobbying him all day to get out and do something. That was, of course, that video message I think they released earlier on Twitter. But George, the White House is making calls, from my understanding, all afternoon from members up on Capitol Hill. The president speaking calls, staffers, the few that remain are, all of them saying the same thing, George. He needs to get out there, he needs to do more, even after that Twitter video message, which some said was at least something, they still believe those callers need more to be done. As far as the building itself, we've been reporting on this, George, as you know, for the last several weeks. The number of people physically in the building has decreased. People that have slowly left, slowly transitioned out. I am told that many people did not physically go to work today because they were fearful of two things. One, the violence that they expected to break out, which obviously we've been covering all day, but also the rage of the president, who has been railing against the vice president and many others in his senior staff over the last several days. The other part, too, George, that we need to remember, and a source pointed this out to me as well, is that the beginning of this week, it started the new year, started the new Congress. It also started the transition. There are staffers in the White House that have already begun the offboarding process. They are slowly turning over their government phones and computers because come January 20th, George, as you know, they're not going to be government employees.
John, you may not be able to answer this, but you know the president, like you've covered him closely for the last 5 years plus. Do you have any sense that any of this is seeping in, that he understands what has happened, that he understands he needs to do more?
George, it's a little close to 6 years, as we know, to be honest. But and what one person said to me, which spoke volumes, and this is from a person I've known since the beginning, the president is still in the denial phase of the grief process. He has not accepted the fact he has lost, he cannot understand it, he cannot fathom it, and thus cannot move forward. There are people, George, that around him are trying to make the necessary preparations for what happens next. He's got to go somewhere. Does he go down to Mar-a-Lago? Do they do some type of event to thank staff? How does he leave the White House? Does he greet President-elect Joe Biden on January 20th? Two people said to me just days ago that no one can approach him on 20th do conversations. He's just not there yet.
Well, that's just crazy. Okay, John Ritchie, thanks very much. I'm going to go back to Martha Red. For the Capitol attorney to move people away.
They're starting to move some people away, George, but behind me are a line of people that can see the police officers there. They've been putting some of the riders into police vehicles. You can see a lot of them handcuffed. They've been several of them that they put in the vehicle. We haven't seen them yet on this side move towards the Capitol, but there's been a lot of movement from the police. We also saw we keep moving back because there was an area there, they were meeting behind the barrier, and they burst down the barrier, these rioters, and destroyed the media gear. There's a big pile of media gear crushed over there by the Capitol, so we have moved back here. They are definitely starting to arrest some people, and most of them, no, not really. I think that, again, these sort of more hardcore groups that we've seen, the Oath Keepers and I assume Proud Boys over there at the Capitol. We were down destroying media gear up there, some of the rioters. But what we have seen is the perimeter. The police are definitely forming a perimeter, and I think at some point
An anti-government militia, an armed militia group. The Groiper Army, whose leader Nick Fuentes was there. They're a white supremacist organization. The European Heritage Association, another white supremacist group. There were Proud Boys who were present. We're still not sure all the people who were actually arrested inside the Capitol today, but my analysts are looking at the images, and I'm certain we're going to know very many of them because their ability in many ways, George, this was a bookend to Charlottesville, where white supremacists took it away down the street of a college town today. They were doing it literally through the heart, the center of power of the United States government.
Well, it's hard to imagine. I was going to ask you, where does it go next? It's hard to imagine something worse than reaching the Capitol. You see these pictures of guns drawn in the House chamber today, but where does this go next? Is there any method to all this? Is there any end game? What should we be thinking about? What should we be worried about?
Well, what we need to understand is that, there are those in the far right who literally espouse a theory called Boogaloo. What they want is civil war. They want armed unrest in the streets. Tonight, they can claim that they achieved that at the U.S. Capitol building. I think where this goes is we are going to need a
So this is the
achievement. Those images that you showed earlier of that individual sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk, or the other images of white supremacists literally standing in the Senate chamber, there's just no precedent for that, Georgia. They will claim it as a victory.
Jonathan Greenblatt, thanks very much. CEO, National Director of the Information League. Toà Nhà just
Yeah, Mr. President, Senator Jeff Berkeley, Oregon, I want to put him on the screen right now. These were the wooden boxes that were holding the electoral college ballots. The caption reads, electoral college rescued from the Senate floor. If our capable floor staff hadn't grabbed them, they would have been burned by the mob. Or that, if you know, those Senate floor staff, I think you work in the House floor staff as well. You don't make a lot of money. You take those jobs because both government and civics and those staff members had enough mindset, even during this wild time, to take those electoral college ballots, which were going to be counted and certified today by both houses of Congress. That is not going to happen. We are just getting word from Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. He's saying that the Senate intends on certifying the electoral college ballots tonight, that they're not going to be driven out. We're going to have to wait and see if they're able to do that, because right now the Capitol is the largest crime scene in America. But according to Manchin, they want to stay tonight and make sure, I guess they do right by this.
Okay, we'll try to get Senator Manchin on the phone with us as well. Let me go back to, is Ben Siegel with us at the Capitol right now, Mark? Let me bring in Ben Siegel. What more can you tell us about what you're hearing from your sources there inside the Capitol and the situation as night has fallen, as we see this perimeter being formed around the Capitol?
George, I'm talking to Democrats and Republicans in the House, and it's their expectation, like their colleagues in the Senate, that they continue this business, that they continue this joint session of Congress to certify the election results. Technically, they would go back and resume the sessions regarding the debate over the electorate from Arizona, but they want this to happen. They want to get this done. This is their responsibility. It's just not clear how quickly this can happen. I was talking to one House Republican leadership aide who said they have to go and make sure that the floor is safe and they have to clear everything up. You know, there's broken glass anywhere. There's furniture that was put from the doors that people coming in. Gas masks probably still on the floor. So there's that one that has to get done in addition to securing the Capitol. People who work on Capitol Hill always joke about it being sort of like a village and almost like Hogwarts from the Harry Potter universe. This is a bunch of buildings with underground tunnels, tons of entrances and exits. It's going to take a really long time to make sure that the campus is safe and secure, and that there aren't still people, elements who want to disrupt the process in the building. So rank and file members, leadership aides still do not know when they will move forward on this. They are all ready to, as a lot of the members are telling you in these interviews, but it's just not clear at this time when that will happen.
Take another minute on that, Ben, because I think you hit on a very important point right there. We see the Capitol right there. There are 3 House buildings on Independence Avenue side, 3 Senate buildings on the Constitution Avenue side, the Library of Congress, and the Supreme Court further up the street, and with most of every piece is matched by an entire warren of offices and tunnels below ground.
That's right. It's basically like a human anthill where the business of the country and the politics get done. Almost every building is connected through multiple tunnels. The members of Congress use these buildings, use these tunnels to get to and from votes during the winter, during inclement weather. They were actually instructed to use these tunnels today because of protest, ironically enough. And this is tens of thousands of people work here every day when there's not a pandemic. And they're in and out of the building. If you're somebody who's protesting, and trying to get in there, trying to disrupt this process, it takes a lot of people to secure the facility and all the entrances and all these different buildings, the 3 or 4 House office buildings, the Library of Congress buildings, and then the 3 Senate buildings on the other side of the building. And one thing that I was struck by watching some of these images coming in from the Capitol, and some of these really frightening scenes of people reaching the Capitol, for the first time in hundreds of years, people making it through the Capitol and occupying it. There are hallways and places in the Capitol that you pass on your walks every day to and from getting coffee, to or from your desk, that are really unremarkable. It's a window that's locked on both sides that looks out to the Washington monument that you really can't get access or use. Sort of these hallways that are locked off for security reasons that don't really lead it. And today, these images were just so striking. You had almost all these windows were broken, and people were trying to to deal with anything. It's almost remarkable in one sense that we've only heard of several, of just sort of a handful of instances of gunshots and maybe one or two injuries from protesters. I'm surprised it's not actually more, quite frankly. So they really have a tall order ahead of them trying to secure this whole facility and also make sure that it's protected so that the members of Congress, the more than 500 members of Congress, can go back to doing their work in both chambers. And then also, we're not even talking about the inauguration. That's going to be another gargantuan task to secure and protect. Because everything we're seeing everywhere on the west front of the Capitol faces the Washington Monument, where you're seeing these protesters fan out and they're not even being pushed back from some of these places. That's still the grounds of the Capitol. That's where the members of Congress might even be sitting when Joe Biden takes the oath of office. So they have to really figure out how to, it's not just secure the Capitol, but expand that perimeter and get it actually continue preparing for the inauguration, which is only happening in a couple of
Ben, you leave 2 days up there on Capitol Hill, you deal with these hundreds, thousands of staffers, most of them young, in the Capitol. As you spoke with everyone today, how would you describe what they were feeling, what their state of mind was as this was all unfolding?
It's a real mix of fear and apprehension and disappointment. Throughout our broadcast, we keep saying, Joe Biden said the siege of the Capitol, and it's almost unbelievable to hear that the seat of American democracy in this country, which is respected and admired from all around the world. People come here from all around the country and the world to work to try to make this country better. To see it, vandalized and broken into and desecrated, it's not something that anybody who ever comes to work here every day, would really expect to happen in this country and really anywhere. And it's just such a magical place where again, people have their differences and they have their disagreements, but there is still comedy. There is still a sense that we're all in this together. We're all trying to make the country better. When you talk to Republicans and Democrats, and for that matter, reporters up there want people to understand what's happening in their government and how Congress functions. And you always see something new in the Congress. You always see a new detail, a new statue, a new historical figure. You can get lost in the building, just soaking in the history and everything that's happened there. And the fact that we're seeing something now that's never played out in American history. I think people from college graduates to the grizzled veterans and people who have been up on the Hill for decades are just, it's disappointment really and just sadness across the spectrum.
Thank you, Ben. Mary Alice Parks, let me bring you in on this as well. As Ben was talking, I was thinking back to my early days on Capitol Hill. That's what was always so special about the Capitol. It truly is the people's house. People walk through it all day long. Members of Congress speak with their constituents all day long. We're going back and forth. All of that put to a stop today. I know you've been speaking with many of them as well. What are you hearing?
Yeah, and they're doing the people's business, but they're humans themselves. I mean, the texts that I've had today have been from young staffers who are hiding in closets, texts that we normally get during mass shootings. I've had texts from staffers who are trying to make sure that their bosses are okay. Bosses, members of Congress who are huddled in other members' offices trying to shelter in place. I was texting with one colleague at one point today who didn't want to tell me where they were or speak loudly on the phone because they were worried they might be heard by some of these, we're not even sure what to call them, were these anarchist protesters, terrorists in the hallway. They didn't want to speak too loudly because they were nervous about whether they would be revealing their location. I mean, just the amount of fear and anxiety on a human level that I think we shouldn't lose today. But I just also want to take a moment. I was really rattled when Jonathan Greenblatt, who you had on just a little bit ago, he kept referring to the Civil War, and he was not using that imagery lightly. I was thinking about the fact that just 2 weeks ago, we had President Trump veto a very popular bipartisan spending bill, partly on the grounds that he didn't want military bases to be named for Confederate names to be overturned. And we had this morning Mike Pence referring back to a time in our history right after the Civil War when the country was trying to piece itself together and had to reinvent these rules around the Electoral College. You just have this feeling today that we are seeing images that harken back to a time of civil war that I never thought in my lifetime we would be seeing or having to even have a conversation about again.
On that point, one of the most striking images of the day, I don't know if we have it, Martha, that image of one of the protesters walking through Statuary Hall in the Capitol, Confederate flag over his shoulder in the Capitol of the United States. Mayor House, thank you. I want to bring in Congressman Ken Buck, Republican of Colorado, also former law enforcement officer. I know you were on the floor as this all unfolded. Congressman, I'm glad you're safe. Tell us what you saw.
Hello? Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. They're saying I'm glad you're safe. Tell us what you saw as this all unfolded on the House floor earlier this afternoon.
Well, I was on the House floor. The first thing that happened was plainclothes Capitol officers came in and escorted the speaker from the chair. We resumed debate at that point. We were soon after that the House, the Capitol building had been breached. About 10 minutes after that, we were advised to reach under our chairs to grab a gas mask and put a gas mask on because tear gas had been deployed in the Capitol. About 10, 15 minutes after that, we could start hearing the doors being banged on, and it appeared that people were trying to breach the House floor itself. So a group of us grabbed some of the heavy furniture, credenzas and whatnot, and moved it in front of the doors to try to prevent that from happening. Police officers were there. They had drawn their weapons, and at that point, the glass to the doors, the glass on the doors, was being broken, and as that happened, more and more members were being escorted off. I left with the last 4 or 5 members. There were at least 20 to 30 police officers in the House floor at that point, House chamber at that point, and we went through the tunnels and got back. Make sure my staff was all right, and then joined them.
You're explaining it in an admirably low-key way, but the image of you and your fellow members of Congress barricading yourself inside the House floor.
It is hard to believe, and it's hard to believe that it happens in America. And what started out as a peaceful protest really involved criminal action, and it is unacceptable in our country.
You're a Republican. You were urging your colleagues to certify the election results. Do you understand what's behind this protest? Or is even engaging in that question trying to rationalize something that shouldn't be rationalized?
Well, I don't know that it should be rationalized, and I don't know it should be rationalized moments after something like this happens. But certainly, I think in the months to come, we will look back and recognize the frustration that has occurred, and we all are to blame for some of this. The rhetoric, so many of the things that have occurred that one side or the other feels has been unfair, and obviously the outcome of the election made millions of people believe that it was unfair, and Joe Biden won the election, and we will have it. I also recognize and feel as though we have to recognize the fact that there are questions about the election and some of the speech, and we should look at that to make sure Americans have confidence in this process.
Right, but that is quite different from the president telling his supporters just hours ago that this election was stolen. Do you have any expectation that he can come out and do more to calm the situation down?
Do I have any anticipation that the president will come out and do something more to calm the situation down? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I think that the president said he asked people to go home. I think that the Attorney General has made it clear that Attorney General Bill Barr has made it clear that what's going on in the Capitol is despicable and has to cease right away. And I think many others are sending out social media messages that are clear. While we're conservatives, we absolutely don't tolerate a violation of the rule of law, and that's what we're witnessing right now.
And moving forward, what should be on the agenda now?
Well, I think we have to make sure that the world sees that Congress is back in session. We are going to certify this vote. We are going to have a peaceful transfer of power. We should, among other things, look at our system electing our president and make sure that it is credible and all Americans have confidence in it. And I think that we resume our duties to do the people's work.
Congressman, thanks for your time today. I'm glad you're safe. I want to bring in Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia. Senator Manchin, we just heard one of your colleagues say you're determined to go through the night to get this done. Is that realistic?
Yes, I think it is, George. We're all together, and we're all secure, and we're all safe. And it's been a sobering moment to watch those who were kind of at odds up in the floor previously, before this fiasco started, and the mob did what they did, and we were all ushered into this safe area. And people started talking, going around, and I made a point to talk to all of the senators. They're my friends, and they're objecting. I respect their right to object, and I spoke to them. And I think they're having second thoughts on this, what this has done, and what the outcome has been. So the main thing that we're determined on is staying here. We're not going to let a mob run us out. We're not going to run us away from our job and our duty and our responsibility to govern. And I feel very, you know what, George, in this most difficult, challenging times, it might be this horrible act that starts uniting us back and doing our job the way we're supposed to, and starting basically bringing America back together.
Well, the last time Congress seemed to be unified, America seemed to be unified, was after the 9/11 attacks. That was 20 years ago. This is an attack from our own country, from our own people.
I just can't believe it. I can't believe the President of the United States would incite this type of action. You know, it's just unacceptable. It's un-American. I've never seen anything like it. I can't believe how a human being. I'm not how it's political, but it doesn't mean I've got to be at odds to where I want to destroy it.
So in your talks with your fellow senator friends and colleagues, even the ones who are objecting, did you get a sense? You said they might be having some second thoughts. Do you get a sense they might be scaling back their objections so this can be finished?
I'm very hopeful of that. I can tell you that they were all very somber. Those, because they were basically doing whatever they believed, and they have a right to do that. As a senator and as a congressperson, you have rights to represent the constituents and the people that you have taken an oath to. But you take an oath to the Constitution. We don't take an oath to a monarchy or dictator. We took an oath to a Constitution. And the Constitution is owned by the Republic and the people of the Republic. And, I talked to all of them, as many as I could, of the 13 or 12 or 13 senators that were objecting. And I said, I would hope that you all think. I said, I respect your right. You're my friend, and you will continue to be my friend. But I hope you see what's causing and what's inciting this. And only you and all of us working together can tamp this down and bring our country back together. I'm hoping that got through, George. I really am.
Well, you were working with several of your colleagues in the weeks before this happened to try to build a bipartisan COVID relief on the COVID relief bill. It's going to be more necessary than ever coming up to the new Congress. Even the Democrats, it appears now, will gain control. It'll be a 50-50 split right down the middle. Those of you in the center are going to hold the whip hand.
Well, we don't look at it from that standpoint. It's not having the power to do this or be the. It could have to unite. That's what we will use. We'll stay together. We're not going to be faltering in our objection to make this government work again. We got to get back to regular order. We've got to go through a process. Bills have to come to the floor that are bipartisan. It has to be voted. It has to be amendments. We can make adjustments and all that, and we'll take some tough votes. This is ridiculous what's been going on for the last decade. We've got to stop it. And I think on both sides, but I can tell you, the bipartisan bicameral group that we put together that brought a package forward that finally got passed to help the American people, this is a group to continue to move this country in the most sensible, reasonable way.
Well, if an act like what we've seen today cannot bring people together, I don't know what can. Senator Manchin, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you stay safe as you work through tonight. Thanks very much, Senator.
We're going to work. We'll get this job done. Okay, thanks, George. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Let me bring Bruce back. You heard the senator say there that he's been talking to some of his colleagues who are having second thoughts. You've been in some contact with some House members as well.
Yeah, and George, we are hearing very similar that some of those who have been or were vowing to contest the election results may now be changing their minds. They certainly are going to be, I think, under a lot of pressure, especially since, of course, none of this is going to change the results. This erupted was really a show simply for the president. And given the fact that it was this effort to try and publicly object to the election results that has sparked, in many ways, this siege that we have seen here today, it would be interesting to see if some Republicans are going to change their minds. There are reports that the number 2 Republican in the House, Kathy McMorris Rogers, has decided to do just that she was planning to object, but now in light of what we have seen here today, that she will not stand in the way of this anymore. And we should say, George, we are also hearing that the Sergeant at Arms has told members that the Capitol building is now secure and has been cleared. And since we know that members are eager, certainly, to finish the work that they started today, to go ahead and certify the results, it will be interesting to see if they are able to get back to work, where they are able to get back to work, whether they do this, in the chamber or in another secured location. We are keeping a close eye on all of that. But the Sergeant at Arms, again, we are hearing, has told members that the Capitol building is secure.
Mary, that's pretty big news that it could happen that quickly.
We don't know exactly how exactly. We don't know when this might happen, but we do know the members are eager to move ahead, and some vowing that they want to do this, tonight if possible.
Okay, Mary Bruce, thanks very much. Tom Yamas, there have been some actions on social media today.
Right, Facebook and Twitter as well both flagged the president's video that he released, and we were talking a short time ago about how this video probably maybe made things even worse. Even though the president was trying to ask some of those rioters to leave, he starts with the mob stolen in now. Facebook, the vice president of integrity, tweeting, "This is an emergency situation, and we are taking appropriate emergency measures, including removing President Trump's video. We removed it because, on balance, we believe it contributes to rather than diminishes the risk of ongoing violence." Rebecca Jarvis, our chief business correspondent, has a statement from Facebook, which reads, "The violent protests in the Capitol today are a disgrace. We prohibit incitement and calls for violence on the platform. We are actively reviewing and removing any content that breaks these rules." So clearly, Facebook and Twitter, which flagged the video, having major issues and major problems with the president's message, which was billed, as Kellyanne had told you, a message of peace and to leave. But clearly, there were other messages, especially at the beginning of that video, that can be interpreted a different way.
Well, and that leads to another question, and this has been no longer president. How long will his Twitter account stay active if kind of actually he's president of the United States? You can imagine he might take even more drastic action once he leaves office.
But it's never stopped him, right, George? And it's one of his active hobbies is to communicate, especially with his supporters. He has one of the largest, if not the largest, following on social media, and he's not afraid to use it. He's not afraid to post, even if he does get taken down.
It's an essential governing political tool.
I mean, he owes part of his presidential victory to it. It was a microphone, those campaign rallies, and his Twitter account that got him so much attention. I want to be clear because some of these images that we're seeing the rioters taking these selfies with smiles on their faces inside the House chamber and the Senate chamber. We can't forget, a woman has been shot tonight. Okay, a woman has been shot tonight. There was all agents that were used on police. And from some of the videos we've seen, clearly they had tools and weapons to break in to Capitol Hill. So this was not sort of a spur of the moment thing. This was not a big joke. Let's take some selfies inside of Capitol Hill. This was a riot, and that's what we should call it. That's what we are calling it.
Well, we heard from the congressman from Oklahoma earlier today, at least 25 Capitol Police injured.
George, it's so bad. I mean, when I saw this, I couldn't believe it. The governor of New Jersey says that they've asked for help. So now state police in New Jersey are going to protect Washington, D.C. It's hard to believe.
Tom Yamas, thanks very much. Let me bring in Senator Jeff Merkley this afternoon. Senator, we showed that picture you had taken or you had obtained of the staffers protecting the Electoral College ballots. We're showing it again right there. Remarkable that had to be done.
Oh, absolutely, because the writers would have busted ballots, and it just feels something sacred about those boxes holding the decisions of the citizens of the United States on the election of our president. So just tremendous appreciation to those staffers who smartly grabbed those boxes and protected them.
Tell us what you've been going through today, what you expect to happen next, Senator.
Well, we are hoping that when the grounds are secured, and hopefully that will be within a short period of time, we'll be able to return to the Senate floor, continue the debate, hold the vote, and I believe that it will be a very, very strong vote to reject the objections to the electoral votes from Arizona, which is what was being challenged. And as I've talked to a number of my Republican colleagues, I think there is a good possibility they will drop all additional objections for other states, and we will get these votes secured. These are objections that should never have happened because the responsibility we have under the Constitution to count the ballots, the only basis in law for challenging them is if they weren't properly certified or if they the information that should have arrived in them. And there's absolutely no contention by those who spoke on the floor that either of those things were the case. This was really an effort to say if we can take these votes away from Biden, we can send the decision to the House of Representatives where Republicans can keep Trump in power. And in that sense, it was just an absolute version of a coup that you would expect in a basically some authoritarian nation without the strength of our traditions and our obligations to the Constitution.
Senator Murphy, we heard similar feelings from Senator Joe Manchin just moments ago, saying he thought that several of the colleagues who were bringing objections were having second thoughts. Have they told you that directly, or is this still an uncertain situation?
A couple colleagues have said that they never intended that their actions be interpreted as an effort to actually undo the election, that they were only intended to have it be a protest to say we need to pay attention to the issues that President Trump has raised. But here's the situation. When a president proceeds to lie to the American people, those Republicans had a responsibility to stand up and say, this is not true. This is like any leader who generates a mob. Other leaders need to stand up and say that information is false. They need to basically not kowtow to the mob. They need to inform and disperse it. And so what we saw today was really the result of the failure of our Republican colleagues to carry the responsibility of leadership to say President Trump is wrong, that there has been integrity in these elections, that it has been scrutinized by the state authorities, it has been reviewed meticulously by dozens of court stands, and that's what we do in a republic. We stand with the peaceful transfer of power, not an effort by an authoritarian like Trump to hang on to power through any means possible.
Senator Murphy, this was only the latest example of that kind of enabling by the president's supporters over the last 4 years. How do you explain it?
Oh boy, there's going to be a lot of time for us to try to analyze all that's gone wrong in the last 4 years. But we know from looking around the world and in current times as well as in history that we're just going to gain power by fostering hate, by fostering division, and that's exactly what Trump set out to do. And I heard my colleagues over the years say, well, it won't get any worse, it'll get better, this will be the end of it. And then suddenly they find that they're hostage to their base because their base has heard this message, come to accept it, come to be.
Is absolutely wrong, is un-American.
Chaos at the Capitol. Protesters stormed the building hoping to effect the transfer of presidential power. Here from Louisiana's congressional delegation in D.C.
Progress lost a record number of new cases and hospitalizations with the coronavirus in Louisiana. Now the mayor of New Orleans is taking action.
It still is crazy to me. It's honestly still sinking in.
Getting ready for Sunday, the reigning Saints fan of the year talks about her passion for the Houdat Nation.
And no parades, but we can still eat cake on this King's Day, the first day of Carnival.
Watching WTNO News at 5, New Orleans' very own.
Welcome to WTNO News. I'm Kurt Sprague.
And video, a live picture behind us here of the nation's capital after the assault earlier today by supporters of President Trump who refused to accept the election of Joe Biden as our next president.
We're going to continue to monitor the situation in Washington, and we're going to return to ABC network coverage of the situation as it was.
In the meantime, our Senator John Kennedy was among those Republicans planning to challenge the Electoral College count today after the vice Kennedy released this statement. The Capitol Police have done an extraordinary job keeping us safe, and I'm thankful, he says, for their heroism. This violent assault on the democratic process and will not be intimidated by any mob that confuses chaos and destruction with strength and wisdom. I will continue to do my job for the people of Louisiana.
And Senator Bill Cassidy did not plan to object to the election results. Here is a video posted on social media as the violence began.
There are people who have violently entered the United States Capitol and are attempting to disrupt what is going on, which is supposed to be the peaceful transition of power. This is wrong. It is absolutely wrong. It is un-American. Period. They should stop. Period. This is about our country. It is not about hooligans.
And Congressman Steve Scalise, like Senator Kennedy, also planned to object to the Electoral College vote. Today, he released this statement on Twitter. United States Capitol Police saved my life. Attacks on law enforcement officers trying to do their jobs are never acceptable. We can passionately protest without being violent.
And Congressman Clay Higgins, who has been critical of the presidential election, released two statements. His first reads, "Violence and lawlessness are unacceptable. This must end now. This is not American." And then his second, "This very day, we are standing for American freedom, legally, peacefully, passionately, within the House of the people and within the parameters of our Constitution. I say to all violent aggressors, stand down."
Once again, we are watching the events in D.C. We've got live video going so we can monitor it, and we will rejoin ABC Network News if the situation warrants it. Now, the big story locally, Mayor LaToya Cantrell is moving New Orleans back to a modified phase 1, limiting businesses to 25 occupancy.
About 30 minutes ago, the mayor said the new restrictions will go into effect Friday, and they will last for 3 weeks. The positivity rate in New Orleans has doubled in just the past week. And Governor John Bel Edwards says there is more COVID in our state than ever before. The Louisiana Department of Health reporting the highest single-day increase of confirmed cases.
WGNO's Chris Welke is here with us in the studio. Chris, is the governor adding any restrictions statewide?
Kurt, Susie, not right now. The governor maintains we cannot enforce our way out of this, but warns behavior must change to get our case count under control. As coronavirus cases continue to surge, Governor John Bel Edwards is fed up with people not following mitigation measures like wearing a mask.
And quite frankly, they're not that damn onerous. Put a mask on.
Edwards believes people owe it to their families and healthcare workers, even if they're not worried about their own protection from the virus.
And if I've been unable to articulate that to the people of Louisiana sufficiently, I apologize. If my command of the English language is not good enough to communicate that sufficiently, I apologize. We have to do better.
And while there is hope that vaccines will slow the spread, Dr. Joseph Cancer says at this point, not enough people have been inoculated.
The vaccine work is important, essential. But right now, in order to stop having to report 40 or 50 or 60 lives being lost a day, mitigation measures.
Louisiana remains on a trajectory of increased cases and hospitalizations. The big concern is the impact is still unknown from the holidays.
Now, we are not imminent in terms of resorting to crisis care, but clearly, if we stay on this trajectory over time, that will happen.
The governor's current expired a week from today. Ultimately, Edwards says people need to mask up and continue doing what data shows works. Kurt, Susie.
He's saying that very firmly once again. Thank you, Chris.
And here is a closer look at those latest coronavirus numbers for the state. More than 6,800 new cases. Also, the highest number of people in hospitals. 30,000 people battling the virus in Louisiana hospitals, 207 of them on ventilators, 46 additional deaths reported. That brings the death total to 7,600.
And here is something else that shows the change in coronavirus cases. For the past few months, the line at the Marriott Jackson Theater to get testing, drive-through testing, had been much less than it was early on in spring and summer. But as you can see, this week, cars are lined up for blocks so that people can get tested. The testing is free and runs daily from 8 a.m. until 4.
Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry and Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin announced the arrest of an Amite City Council member. Amite City Councilman Emmanuel Sanders is accused of election fraud. Landry says 6 people in Amite used the address of a vacant lot when they registered to vote. Landry says Sanders encouraged the citizens to change their voter registration address.
And a big honor for New Orleans rapper. He won. He has been chosen by Governor Edwards to serve on the Louisiana Council for the success of Black men and boys. We talked to Dean today. He told us serving on the council is an opportunity he doesn't take lightly. He told LBJ he plans to make the most of it.
When you're in rooms with the governor of your state, and when you're in rooms with the presidents of universities and people from these huge corporations, you realize how much these systematic decisions influence the well-being of our youth forward.
And Governor Edwards tweeted, Louisiana is lucky to have you on the council. Look forward to working with you toward a brighter and more equitable future. And D1 continues with his music career. He's got an album coming out and clothing line D1.
Some people in Louisiana are now getting the increased unemployment benefits included in a recent federal COVID-19 relief package. The Louisiana Workforce Commission says you must already be on the state's unemployment list to get that extra $600. The extra benefit will run through March, or in some cases as late as April, unless a new congressional approval package comes forward. The LWC also says there are resources available on its website for people who don't qualify for unemployment. To find out more about pandemic unemployment assistance, just head to laworks.net.
And in New Orleans, there is a delay with property tax bills. The city is waiting for final approval of the tax rolls. That comes from the state. And once the state approves, the city will post the property taxes. New Orleans city leaders say payments of the taxes will be adjusted along with the due date to accommodate the delay. Next on WGNO News, every year we eat thousands of king cakes. You know, as a state, hurt all of us. But do you really know the history of the king cake? That's ahead.
Z1, and we are New Orleans' very own.
The Archdiocese of New Orleans has declared bankruptcy. If you were sexually abused in connection with the Archdiocese, including schools, orphanages, parishes, or an affiliated ministry, you could receive compensation, but you need to file a claim notice received by March 1st, 2021. You may file a claim regardless of your current age or the year the sexual abuse occurred. For more information, visit nolachurchclaims.com or call 877-476-4389.
We're Dudley DeBosier, and we're prouder than ever to be the official injury lawyers of the New Orleans Saints. We want to congratulate our team on a great season so far, and now we got to keep this run going. The Saints are back in the 12 with a whole lot more to play for. So let's take it to the next level.
Let's go, Saints fans. Once again, it's time to rally behind the black and gold.
Command Dudley DeBosier, official injury lawyers of the New Orleans Saints. Call 444-4444.
What does it mean to be New Orleans' very own? It's a smile, a familiar face. It's up to the minute information. The minute you're up. It's the start of something good that ends with something great. As you are, and we are, New Orleans' very own.
What does it mean when I say, make that one call?
It means if you're injured in a car accident, just call us.
One call will fight to get you the most money you deserve. One call gets you the Martin thing. Now you know what to do. Make that one call.
One call, that's all.
The world is demanding change. We're not to change the way we interact. We work to change our society to make everyone's lives better. It can look pretty dire, but there is hope. Staying inside has brought our families together. Our community remains strong, fighting together for our hopes and dreams. Keeping you up to date on all the things we know are important, because our community is everything. It's who we are. WGNO TV.
You're watching WGNO News at 5 with Kurt Sprint, Susan Rogen, and meteorologist Hank Allen.
Well, for the third year in a row, you can find all the king cakes you could ever eat in one place. The King Cake Hub reopened today, and this year it's in the Broad Theater on Broad Street. The biggest problem you might have there is deciding what flavor of king cake you want from the many choices available.
I brought count. I think we're somewhere around 65, give or take a couple. But 15 different bases here. So we brought on a celebrity partner this year.
The King Cake Hub is open every day from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. through Lundi Gras, and this year the cakes can also be delivered to you throughout the metro area by DoorDash.
Bakeries across cities. But Deputy Christopher Leach tells you why we eat king cake.
December 25th is widely celebrated as the day of the Christian God's incarnation, but it's the 12th day of Christmas on January 6th when three kings would bestow gifts on what would be known as Epiphany. But to quote the last queen of France before the revolution, let them eat cake. And this is the story about the king's cake.
There were always two king cakes in France. There was the one from northern France, which is made of puff pastry and almond frangipane. In southern France, they made the brioche ring, and that was also a king cake.
Both king cakes coexisted quite harmoniously, but as people from the southern region of France made the journey to colonize New Orleans in the 18th century, they brought with them a sweet tradition. But the reason for making a cake with a baby started back in Europe with the Catholic Church. In fact, anywhere there is Catholicism, you could find a pastry linked to Christ. But no matter its nationality, each pastry harbors a secret.
It started out being a fava bean dried and cooked into cake, and if you got that cake on that day, then you were king or queen for the party.
Even older, at the time of Europeanism, there were celebrations where one lucky member from the townsfolk would become the king of fools, or king for a day. French bakers would soon hide small porcelain dolls in the cakes, but in 1930s New Orleans, Mackenzie's Bakery would use small bisque German figurines called frozen charlottes to locate the hot spots in the oven.
As we switched to electric kilns, you could control the temperature better, and little charlottes were no longer necessary. So there were tons of them in the Mackenzie box. Who knows how many? A truckload full. And so instead of a bean, we put these little frozen charlottes.
Soon, with the innovation of Mackenzie's Bakery, charlottes would become plastic babies and part of New Orleans history.
And now you know. Across New Orleans, 750,000 king cakes are baked every year at all the various bakeries.
And Rex, the oldest carnival crew in the city, has come out with its annual proclamation. It's as fancy as ever, but instead of announcing the parading season, the proclamation reads, "We trust in our absence that our subjects will find ways to safely celebrate the joys of this carnival season, preserving our traditions in anticipation of their joyous renewal in 2022.
Everything jots back a sort of particular memory that brings some happiness. Best to the best.
The first ever New Orleans Saints Fan of the Year explains her love for the black and gold.
And rain on the way, moving through East Texas right now. That'll be in here tonight. We'll talk about that, plus that cold forecast in your 7-day coming up.
WGNO weather is brought to you by the King Fund. Are you hiring? Check out the new WGNO job board. Post your open positions and reach job seekers. Let us help you promote your job opportunities, powered by WGNO and all of our platforms. Go to WGNO.com and post your opening today.